I had learned the magical act of paying back to the spirit of man from Don Juan. I had asked him once, overwhelmed by the realization that I could never pay him back for all he had done for me, if there was anything in the world I could do to even the score. We were leaving a bank after exchanging some Mexican currency. "I don't need you to pay me back," he said, "but if you still want to pay back, make your deposit to the spirit of man. That's always a very small account, and whatever one puts in it is more than enough." By helping that sick child, I had merely paid back to the spirit of man for any help that my little boy may receive from strangers along his path. I told La Gorda that my love for him would remain alive for the rest of my life, even though I would never see him again. I wanted to tell her that the memory I had of him was buried so deep that nothing could touch it, but I desisted. I felt it would have been superfluous to talk about it. Besides, it was getting dark and I wanted to get out of that gully. "We better go," I said. "I'll take you home. Maybe some other time we can talk about these things again." She laughed the way Don Juan used to laugh at me. I had apparently said something utterly funny. "Why do you laugh, La Gorda?" I asked. "Because you know yourself that we can't leave this place just like that," she said. "You have an appointment with power here, and so do I." She walked back to the cave and crawled in. "Come on in," she yelled from inside. "There is no way to leave." I reacted most incongruously. I crawled in and sat next to her again. It was evident that she too had tricked me. I had not come there to have any confrontations. I should have been furious. I was indifferent instead. I could not lie to myself that I had only stopped there on my way to Mexico City. I had gone there compelled by something beyond my comprehension. She handed me my notebook and motioned me to write. She said that if I wrote, I would not only relax myself, but I would also relax her. "What is this appointment with power?" I asked. "The Nahual told me that you and I have an appointment here with something out there. You first had an appointment with Soledad, and then one with the Little Sisters. They were supposed to destroy you. The Nahual said that if you survived their assaults, I had to bring you here so that we together could keep the third appointment. But what kind of appointment is it? I really don't know. Like everything else, it depends on us. Right now, there are some things out there that have been waiting for you. I say that they have been waiting for you because I come here by myself all the time and nothing ever happens. But tonight is different. You are here, and those things will come." "Why is the Nahual trying to destroy me?" I asked. "He's not trying to destroy anybody," La Gorda exclaimed in protest. "You are his child. Now he wants you to be himself. More himself than any of us. But to be a true Nahual, you have to claim your power. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so careful in setting up Soledad and the Little Sisters to stalk you. He taught Soledad how to change her shape and rejuvenate herself. He made her construct a devilish floor in her room, a floor no one can oppose. You see, Soledad is empty, so the Nahual set her up to do something gigantic. He gave her a task, a most difficult and dangerous task, but the only one which was suited for her, and that was to finish you off. He told her that nothing could be more difficult than for one sorcerer to kill another. It's easier for an average man to kill a sorcerer, or for a sorcerer to kill an average man. But two sorcerers don't fit well at all. The Nahual told Soledad that her best bet was to surprise you and scare you. And that's what she did. The Nahual set her up to be a desirable woman so she could lure you into her room, and there her floor would have bewitched you. Because, as I've said, no one, but no one, can stand up to that floor. That floor was the Nahual's masterpiece for Soledad. But you did something to her floor, and Soledad had to change her tactics in accordance with the Nahual's instructions. He told her that if her floor failed and she could not frighten and surprise you, she had to talk to you and tell you everything you wanted to know. The Nahual trained her to talk very well as her last resource. But Soledad could not overpower you even with that. Why was it so important to overpower me? She paused and peered at me. She cleared her throat and sat up straight. She looked up at the low roof of the cave and exhaled noisily through her nose. Soledad is a woman like myself, she said. I'll tell you something about my own life, and maybe you'll understand her. I had a man once. He got me pregnant when I was very young, and I had 2 daughters with him, one after the other. My life was hell. That man was a drunkard and beat me day and night, and I hated him, and he hated me, and I got fat like a pig. One day, another man came along and told me that he liked me and wanted me to go with him to work in the city as a paid servant. He knew I was a hard-working woman and only wanted to exploit me. But my life was so miserable that I fell for it and went with him. He was worse than the first man, mean and fearsome. He couldn't stand me after a week or so. And he used to give me the worst beatings you can imagine. I thought he was going to kill me, and he wasn't even drunk. And all because I hadn't found work. Then he sent me to beg on the streets with a sick baby. He would pay the child's mother something from the money I got. And then he would beat me because I hadn't made enough. The child got sicker and sicker, and I knew that if it died while I was begging, the man would kill me. So one day when I knew that he was not there, I went to the child's mother and gave her her baby and some of the money I had made that day. That was a lucky day for me. A kind foreign lady had given me 50 pesos to buy medicine for the baby. I had been with that horrible man for 3 months, and I thought it had been 20 years. I used the money to go back to my home. I was pregnant again. The man had wanted me to have a child of my own, so that he would not have to pay for one. When I got to my hometown, I tried to go back to see my children, but they had been taken away by their father's family. All the family got together under the pretense that they wanted to talk to me, but instead they took me to a deserted place and beat me with sticks and rocks and left me for dead. La Gorda showed me the many scars on her scalp. To this day, I don't know how I made it back to town. I even lost the child I had in my womb. I went to an aunt I still had. My parents were dead. She gave me a place to rest, and she tended to me. She fed me, the poor soul, for 2 months before I could get up. Then one day my aunt told me that that man was in town looking for me. He had talked to the police and had said that he had given me money in advance to work and that I had run away, stealing the money after I had killed a woman's baby. I knew that the end had come for me. But my luck turned right again, and I caught a ride in the truck of an American. I saw the truck coming on the road, and I lifted my hand in desperation, and the man stopped and let me get on. He drove me all the way to this part of Mexico. He dropped me in the city. I didn't know a soul. I roamed all over the place for days like a crazy dog, eating garbage from the street. That was when my luck turned for the last time. I met Pablito, with whom I have a debt that I can't pay back. Pablito took me to his carpentry shop and gave me a corner there to put my bed. He did that because he felt sorry for me. He found me in the market after he stumbled and fell on top of me. I was sitting there begging. A moth or a bee, I don't know which, flew to him and hit him in the eye. He turned around on his heels and stumbled and fell right on top of me. I thought he would be so mad that he would hit me, but he gave me some money instead. I asked him if he could give me work. That was when he took me to his shop and set me up with an iron and an ironing board to do laundry. I did very well, except that I got fatter because most of the people I washed for fed me with their leftovers. Sometimes I ate 16 times a day. I did nothing else but eat. Kids in the street used to taunt me and sneak behind me and step on my heels. And then someone would push me and I would fall. Those kids made me cry with their cruel jokes, especially when they used to spoil my wash on purpose. One day, very late in the afternoon, a weird old man came over to see Pablito. I had never seen that man before. I had never known that Pablito was in cahoots with such a scary, awesome man. I turned my back to him and kept on working. I was alone there. Suddenly, I felt the hands of that man on my neck. My heart stopped. I could not scream. I couldn't even breathe. I fell down, and that awful man held my head, maybe for an hour. Then he left. I was so frightened that I stayed where I had fallen until the next morning. Pablito found me there. He laughed and said that I should be very proud and happy because that old man was a powerful sorcerer and was one of his teachers. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe Pablito was a sorcerer. He said that his teacher had seen a perfect circle of moths flying over my head. He had also seen my death circling around me. And that was why he had acted like lightning and had changed the direction of my eyes. Pablito also said that the Nahual had laid his hands on me and had reached into my body, and that soon I would be different. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had no idea what that crazy old man had done either. But it didn't matter to me. I was like a dog that everyone kicked around. Pablito had been the only person who had been kind to me. At first, I had thought he wanted me for his woman, but I was too ugly and fat and smelly. He just wanted to be kind to me. The crazy old man came back another night and grabbed me again by the neck from behind. He hurt me terribly. I cried and screamed. I didn't know what he was doing. He never said a word to me. I was deathly afraid of him. Then, later on, he began to talk to me and told me what to do with my life. I liked what he said. He took me everywhere with him, but my emptiness was my worst enemy. I couldn't accept his ways. So one day he got sick and tired of pampering me and sent the wind after me. I was in the back of Soledad's house by myself that day, and I felt the wind getting very strong. It was blowing through the fence. It got into my eyes. I wanted to get inside the house, but my body was frightened, and instead of walking through the door, I walked through the gate in the fence. The wind pushed me and made me twirl. I tried to go back to the house, but it was useless. I couldn't break the force of the wind. It pushed me over the hills and off the road, and I ended up in a deep hole, a hole like a tomb. The wind kept me there for days and days, until I had decided to change and accept my fate without recrimination. Then the wind stopped, and the Nahual found me and took me back to the house. He told me that my task was to give what I didn't have, love and affection, and that I had to take care of the sisters, Lydia and Josefina, better than if they were myself. I understood then what the Nahual had been saying to me for years. My life had been over a long time ago. He had offered me a new life, and that life had to be completely new. I couldn't bring to that new life my ugly old ways. That first night he found me, the moths had pointed me out to him. I had no business rebelling against my fate. I began my change by taking care of Lydia and Josefina better than I took care of myself I did everything the Nahual told me, and one night, in this very gully, in this very cave, I found my completeness. I had fallen asleep right here where I am now, and then a noise woke me up. I looked up and saw myself as I had once been, thin, young, fresh. It was my spirit that was coming back to me. At first, it didn't want to come closer because I still looked pretty awful. But then it couldn't help itself and came to me. I knew right then and all at once what the Nahual had struggled for years to tell me. He had said that when one has a child, that child takes the edge of our spirit. For a woman to have a girl means the end of that edge. To have had two, as I did, meant the end of me. The best of my strength and my illusions went to those girls. They stole my edge, the Nahual said, in the same way I had stolen it from my parents. That's our fate. A boy steals the biggest part of his edge from his father, a girl from her mother. The Nahual said that people who have had children could tell, if they aren't as stubborn as you, that something is missing in them. Some craziness, some nervousness, some power they had before is gone. They used to have it, but where is it now? The Nahual said that it is in the little child running around the house, full of energy, full of illusions. In other words, complete. He said that if we watch children, we can tell that they are daring. They move in leaps. If we watch their parents, we can see that they are cautious and timid. They don't leap anymore. The Nahual told me we explained that by saying that the parents are grown-ups and have responsibilities. But that's not true. The truth of the matter is that they have lost their edge. I asked La Gorda what the Nahual would have said if I had told him that I knew parents with much more spirit and edge than their children. She laughed, covering her face in a gesture of sham embarrassment. "You can ask me," she said, giggling. "You want to hear what I think?" "Of course I want to hear it." "Those people don't have more spirit. They merely had a lot of vigor to begin with, and have trained their children to be obedient and meek. They have frightened their children all their lives. That's all." I described to her the case of a man I knew, a father of 4, who at the age of 53 changed his life completely. That entailed leaving his wife and his executive job in a large corporation after more than 25 years of building a career and a family. He chucked it all very daringly and went to live on an island in the Pacific. "You mean he went there all by himself?" La Gorda asked with a tone of surprise. She had destroyed my argument. I had to admit that the man had gone there with his 23-year-old bride, who no doubt is complete, La Gorda added. I had to agree with her again. An empty man uses the completeness of a woman all the time, she went on. A complete woman is dangerous in her completeness, more so than a man. She is unreliable, moody, nervous, but also capable of great changes. Women like that can pick themselves up and go anywhere. They'll do nothing there, but that's because they had nothing going to begin with. Empty people, on the other hand, can't jump like that anymore, but they're more reliable. The Nawal said that empty people are like worms that look around before moving a bit, and then they back up, and then they move a little bit more again. Complete people always jump, somersault, and almost always land on their heads, but it doesn't matter to them. The Nawal said that to enter into the other world, one has to be complete. To be a sorcerer, one has to have all of one's luminosity, no holes, no patches, and all the edge of the spirit. So a sorcerer who is empty has to regain completeness. Man or woman, they must be complete to enter into that world out there, that eternity where the Nawal and Gennaro are now waiting for us. She stopped talking and stared at me for a long moment. There was barely enough light to write. But how did you regain your completeness? I asked. She jumped at the sound of my voice. I repeated my question. She stared up at the roof of the cave before answering me. I had to refuse those two girls, she said. The Nawal once told you how to do that, but you didn't want to hear it. His point was that one has to steal that edge back. He said that we got it the hard way by stealing it, and that we must recover it the same way, the hard way. He guided me to do that, and the first thing he made me do was to refuse my love for those two children. I had to do that in dreaming. Little by little, I learned not to like them, but the Nawal said that that was useless. One has to learn not to care and not to like. Whenever those girls meant nothing to me, I had to see them again, lay my eyes and my hands on them. I had to pat them gently on the head and let my left side snatch the edge out of them. What happened to them? Nothing. They never felt a thing. They went home and are now like two grown-up persons, empty like most people around them. They don't like the company of children because they had no use for them. I would say that they are better off. I took the craziness out of them. They didn't need it, while I did. I didn't know what I was doing when I gave it to them. Besides, they still retained the edge they stole from their father. The Nawal was right. No one noticed the loss. But I did notice my gain. As I looked out of this cave, I saw all my illusions lined up like a row of soldiers. The world was bright and new. The heaviness of my body and my spirit had been lifted off, and I was truly a new being. Do you know how you took your edge from your children? They are not my children. I have never had any. Look at me. She crawled out of the cave, lifted her skirt, and showed me her naked body. The first thing I noticed was how slender and muscular she was. She urged me to come closer and examine her. Her body was so lean and firm that I had to conclude she could not possibly have had children. She put her right leg on a high rock and showed me her vagina. Her drive to prove her change was so intense that I had to laugh to bridge my nervousness. I said that I was not a doctor, and therefore I could not tell, but that I was sure she must be right. Of course I'm right, she said as she crawled back into the cave. Nothing has ever come out of this womb. After a moment's pause, she answered my question, which I had already forgotten under the onslaught of her display. My left side took my edge back, she said. All I did was to go and visit the girls. I went there 4 or 5 times to allow them time to feel at ease with me. They were big girls and were going to school. I thought I would have to fight not to like them, but the Nahual said that it didn't matter, that I should like them if I wanted to. So I liked them, but my liking them was just like liking a stranger. My mind was made up. My purpose was unbending. I want to enter into the other world while I'm still alive, as the Nahual told me. In order to do that, I need all the edge of my spirit. I need my completeness. Nothing can turn me away from that world. Nothing. She stared at me defiantly. You have to refuse both, the woman who emptied you and the little boy who has your love, if you are seeking your completeness. The woman you can easily refuse. The little boy is something else. Do you think that your useless affection for that child is so worthy as to keep you from entering into that realm? I had no answer. It was not that I wanted to think it over. It was rather that I had become utterly confused. Soledad has to take her edge out of Pablito if she wants to enter into the Nahual, she went on. How in the hell is she going to do that? Pablito, no matter how weak he is a sorcerer. But the Nahual gave Soledad a unique chance. He said to her that her only moment would come when you walked into the house. And for that moment, he not only made us move out into the other house, but he made us help her widen the path to the house so you could drive your car to the very door. He told her that if she lived an impeccable life, she would bag you and suck away all your luminosity, which is all the power the Nahual left inside your body. That would not be difficult for her to do. Since she's going in the opposite direction, she could drain you to nothing. Her great feat was to lead you to a moment of helplessness. Once she had killed you, your luminosity would have increased her power, and she would then have come after us. I was the only one who knew that. Lydia, Josefina, and Rosa love her. I don't. I knew what her designs were. She would have taken us one by one in her own time, since she had nothing to lose and everything to gain. The Nahual said to me that there was no other way for her. He entrusted me with the girls and told me what to do in case Soledad killed you and came after our luminosity. He figured that I had a chance to save myself and to save perhaps one of the three. You see, Soledad is not a bad woman at all. She's simply doing what an impeccable warrior would do. The little sisters like her more than they like their own mothers. She's a real mother to them. That was, the Nahual said, the point of her advantage. I haven't been able to pull the little sisters away from her, no matter what I do. So if she had killed you, she would then have taken at least 2 of those 3 trusting souls. Then, without you in the picture, Pablito is nothing. Soledad would have squashed him like a bug. And then, with all her completeness and power, she would have entered into that world out there. If I had been in her place, I would have tried to do exactly as she did. So you see, it was all or nothing for her. When you first arrived, everyone was gone. It looked as if it was the end for you and for some of us. But then, at the end, it was nothing for her and a chance for the sisters. The moment I knew that you had succeeded, I told the 3 girls that now it was their turn. The Nahual had said that they should wait until the morning to catch you unawares. He said that the morning was not a good time for you. He commanded me to stay away and not interfere with the sisters, and to come in only if you would try to injure their luminosity. Were they supposed to kill me too? Well, yes. You are the male side of their luminosity. Their completeness is at times their disadvantage. The Nahual ruled them with an iron hand and balanced them. But now that he's gone, they have no way of leveling off. Your luminosity could do that for them. How about you, Gorda? Are you supposed to finish me off too? I've told you already that I'm different. I am balanced. My emptiness, which was my disadvantage, is now my advantage. Once a sorcerer regains his completeness, he's balanced. While a sorcerer who was always complete is a bit off. Like Gennaro was a bit off. But the Nahual was balanced because he had been incomplete, like you and me. Even more so than you and me. He had 3 sons and 1 daughter. The little sisters are like Gennaro, a bit off. And most of the times so taught that they have no measure. How about me, Gorda? Do I also have to go after them? No, only they could have profited by sucking away your luminosity. You can't profit at all by anyone's death. The Nawal left a special power with you, a balance of some kind, which none of us has. Can't they learn to have that balance? Sure they can, but that has nothing to do with the task the little sisters had to perform. Their task was to steal your power. For that, they became so united that they are now one single being. They trained themselves to sip you up like a glass of soda. The Nawal set them up to be deceivers of the highest order, especially Josefina. She put on a show that was peerless. Compared to their art, Soledad's attempt was child's play. She's a crude woman. The little sisters are true sorceresses. Two of them gained your confidence, while the third shocked you and rendered you helpless. They played their cards to perfection. You fell for it all and nearly succumbed. The only flaw was that you injured and cured Rosa's luminosity the night before, and that made her jumpy. Had it not been for her nervousness and her biting your side so hard, chances are you wouldn't be here now. I saw everything from the door. I came in at the precise moment you were about to annihilate them. But what could I do to annihilate them? How could I know that? I'm not you. I mean, what did you see me doing? I saw your double coming out of you. What did it look like? It looked like you. What else? But it was very big and menacing. Your double would have killed them. So I came in and interfered with it. It took the best of my power to calm you down. The sisters were no help. They were lost. And you were furious and violent. You changed color right in front of us twice. One color was so violent that I feared you would kill me too. What color was it, Gorda? White. What else? The double is white, yellowish white, like the sun. I stared at her. The smile was very new to me. Yes, she continued, we are pieces of the sun. That is why we are luminous beings. But our eyes can't see that luminosity because it is very faint. Only the eyes of a sorcerer can see it, and that happens after a lifetime struggle. Her revelation had taken me by total surprise. I tried to reorganize my thoughts in order to ask the most appropriate question. Did the Nawal ever tell you anything about the sun? I asked. Yes. We are like the sun, but very, very faint. Our light is too weak, but it is light anyway. But did he say that the sun was perhaps the Nawal? I insisted desperately. La Gorda did not answer. She made a series of involuntary noises with her lips. She was apparently thinking how to answer my probe. I waited, ready to write it down. After a long pause, she crawled out of the cave. I'll show you my faint light. she said matter-of-factly. She walked to the center of the narrow gully in front of the cave and squatted. From where I was, I could not see what she was doing, so I had to get out of the cave myself. I stood 10 or 12 feet away from her. She put her hands under her skirt while she was still squatting. Suddenly, she stood up. Her hands were loosely clasped into fists. She raised them over her head and snapped her fingers open. I heard a quick, bursting sound, and I saw sparks flying from her fingers. She again clasped her hands and then snapped them open, and another volley of much larger sparks flew out of them. She squatted once more and reached under her skirt. She seemed to be pulling something from her pubis. She repeated the snapping movement of her fingers as she threw her hands over her head. And I saw a spray of long, luminous fibers flying away from her fingers. I had to tilt my head up to see them against the already dark sky. They appeared to be long, fine filaments of a reddish light. After a while, they faded and disappeared. She squatted once again, and when she let her fingers open, a most astonishing display of lights emanated from them. The sky was filled with thick rays of light. It was a spellbinding light. I became engrossed in it. My eyes were fixed. I was not paying attention to La Gorda. I was looking at the lights. I heard a sudden outcry that forced me to look at her. Just in time to see her grab one of the lines she was creating and spin to the very top of the canyon. She hovered there for an instant like a dark, huge shadow against the sky, and then descended to the bottom of the gully in spurts or small leaps, or as if she were coming down a stairway on her belly. I suddenly saw her standing over me. I had not realized that I had fallen on my seat. I stood up. She was soaked in perspiration and was panting, trying to catch her breath. She could not speak for a long time. She began to jog in place. I did not dare to touch her. Finally, she seemed to have calmed down enough to crawl back into the cave. She rested for a few minutes. Her actions had been so fast that I had hardly had any time to evaluate what had happened. At the moment of her display, I had felt an unbearable, ticklish pain in the area just below my navel. I had not physically exerted myself, and yet I was also panting. "I think it's time to go to our appointment," she said, out of breath. "My flying opened us both. You felt my flying in your belly. That means you are open and ready to meet the 4 forces." "What 4 forces are you talking about?" "The Nawals and Gennaro's allies. You've seen them. They are horrendous. Now they are free from the Nawal's and Gennaro's gourds. You heard one of them around Soledad's house the other night. They are waiting for you. The moment the darkness of the day sets in, they'll be uncontainable. One of them even came after you in the daytime at Soledad's place. Those allies now belong to you and me. We will take 2 each. I don't know which ones, and I don't know how either. All the Nawal told me was that you and I would have to tackle them by ourselves. Wait, wait, I shouted. She did not let me speak. She gently put her hand over my mouth. I felt a pang of terror in the pit of my stomach. I had been confronted in the past with some inexplicable phenomena which Don Juan and Don Gennaro had called their allies. There were 4 of them, and they were entities as real as anything in the world. Their presence was so outlandish that it would create an unparalleled state of fear in me every time I perceived them. The first one I had encountered was Don Juan's. It was a dark, rectangular mass, 8 or 9 feet high and 4 or 5 feet across. It moved with the crushing weight of a giant boulder and breathed so heavily that it reminded me of the sound of bellows. I had always encountered it at night in the darkness. I had fancied it to be like a door that walked by, pivoting on one corner and then on the other. The second ally I came across was Don Gennaro's. It was a long-faced, bald-headed, extraordinarily tall, glowing man with thick lips and enormous, droopy eyes. He always wore pants that were too short for his long, skinny legs. I had seen those 2 allies a great many times while in the company of Don Juan and Don Gennaro. The sight of them would invariably cause an irreconcilable separation between my reason and my perception. On the one hand, I had no rational ground whatsoever to believe that what was happening to me was actually taking place. And on the other hand, there was no possible way of discarding the truthfulness of my perception. Since they had always appeared while Don Juan and Don Gennaro were around, I had filed them away as products of the powerful influence that those 2 men had had on my suggestible personality. In my understanding, it was either that or that Don Juan and Don Gennaro had in their possession forces they called their allies. Forces which were capable of manifesting themselves to me as those horrendous entities. A feature of those allies was that they never allowed me to scrutinize them thoroughly. I had tried various times to focus my undivided attention on them, but every time I would get dizzy and disassociated. The other 2 allies were more elusive. I had seen them only once, a gigantic black jaguar with yellow glowing eyes, and a ravenous, enormous coyote. The 2 beasts were ultimately aggressive and overpowering. The jaguar was Don Gennaro's, and the coyote was Don Juan's. La Gorda crawled out of the cave. I followed her. She led the way. We walked out of the gully and reached a long, rocky plain. She stopped me and let me step ahead. I told her that if she was going to let me lead us, I was going to try to get to the car. She shook her head affirmatively and clung to me. I could feel her clammy skin. She seemed to be in a state of great agitation. It was perhaps a mile to where we had left the car, and to reach it, we had to cross the deserted, rocky plain. Don Juan had shown me a hidden trail among some big boulders, almost on the side of the mountain that flanked the plain toward the east. I headed for that trail. Some unknown urge was guiding me. Otherwise, I would have taken the same trail we had taken before, when we had crossed the plain on the level ground. La Gorda seemed to be anticipating something awesome. She grabbed onto me. Her eyes were wild. "Are we going the right way?" I asked. She did not answer. She pulled her shawl and twisted it until it looked like a long, thick rope. She encircled my waist with it, crossed over the ends, and encircled herself. She tied a knot and thus had bound together in a band, had us bound together in a band that looked like a figure 8. "What did you do this for?" I asked. She shook her head. Her teeth chattered, but she could not say a word. Her fright seemed to be extreme. She pushed me to keep on walking. I could not help wondering why I was not scared out of my wits myself. As we reached the high trail, the physical exertion began to take its toll on me. I was wheezing and had to breathe through my mouth. I could see the shape of the big boulders. There was no moon, but the sky was so clear that there was enough light to distinguish shapes. I could hear La Gorda also wheezing. I tried to stop to catch my breath, but she pushed me gently as she shook her head negatively. I wanted to make a joke to break the tension when I heard a strange, thumping noise. My head moved involuntarily to my right to allow my left ear to scan the area. I stopped breathing for an instant, and then I clearly heard that someone else besides La Gorda and myself was breathing heavily. I checked again to make sure before I told her. There was no doubt that massive shape was there among the boulders. I put my hand on La Gorda's mouth as we kept on moving and signaled her to hold her breath. I could tell that the massive shape was very close. It seemed to be sliding as quietly as it could. It was wheezing softly.